a major hit to Russian self-confidence. In Italy, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was publicly sent away. The Italian newspaper Corriere della Sera put propagandist Lavrov in his place and refused to publish the interview with the Russian foreign minister because of controversial statements in his words. They stated directly, "Yes, we interviewed Sergei Lavrov, but he was talking such blatant nonsense that we will not publish it." The Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has already called this blatant censorship. But the funniest thing is that the Russian Foreign Ministry is complaining that they offered the newspaper an exclusive interview with Lavrov to stop the growing flow of fake news about Russia. But the newspaper, having heard enough fake news from Lavrov himself, refused to publish his nonsense. But the Italian newspaper made a very interesting offer to Sergei Lavrov to still publish the interview, but for some reason Lavrov got scared of this offer and refused. I'll tell you what that offer was in this episode. I'll also tell you what Lavrov said in this interview about how Nazism is being revived and raising its head all over Europe. We've heard this somewhere before. My name is Pechiy. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, give it a like, and write any detailed comment under this episode. Subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechiy News, link in the video description. There we publish breaking news as soon as it comes in. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation or a paid sponsorship subscription using the links and details provided. In the description of this video, it says support the channel Pechiy. Choose any format that is convenient for you. I'll appreciate your support. Today, the Italians literally dismissed Sergei Lavrov. The Italian newspaper Corriere della Sera refused to publish an interview with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov because of controversial statements. And then Russians started howling, "How could this happen? What kind of censorship is this?" Today, the Russian Foreign Ministry complained that they offered the newspaper an exclusive interview with Lavrov to stop, quote, "the increasing flow of fake news about Russia in the Italian media." According to the Russian Foreign Ministry, the editorial staff of the publication agreed and sent a list of questions to which the Russian minister gave detailed answers. However, the newspaper did not publish this interview. And next, I'll quote the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Quote, "We were told that Lavrov's statements contain many controversial claims that require fact-checking or additional clarification, and publishing them would exceed reasonable length." Let me clarify here. Any publication is not actually obligated to publish an interview if it considers it manipulative in nature, or potentially harmful. According to journalistic standards, if an interviewer sees obvious manipulation, propaganda, or distorted facts, they are simply obligated to add a footnote. And under every such manipulative quote from someone like Lavrov, they should explain exactly how the interviewee is manipulating or lying. And in the Italian newspaper, they directly tell the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, "Listen, there will be so many such footnotes with explanations that they will exceed the amount of what Lavrov actually said, so there is no point in publishing such a text at all." Well, in other words, Lavrov lies so much that there's no point in showing this to the reader, because you'd have to explain every word and show that it's a lie. After that, the Russians don't give up. And the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs suggests publishing a shortened version of the interview in the print newspaper without explanations and the full version on the website. And here the Russians wanted to be a bit sneaky. You only print Lavrov's answers in the newspaper, while your explanations go online. The idea was that Italians would read Lavrov in the newspaper and not visit the website for explanations. But Della Sera's career refused such an offer. Like, we don't need that kind of interview at all. Now listen to what Russians yelled in response. The official statement from the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Quote, "We consider this blatant censorship. We believe that in Italian... We consider this blatant censorship. We believe Italian citizens have the right to information, as guaranteed by Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights." So, can you imagine these are Russians? I emphasize, Russians remembered human rights. Well, that's just funny. Russians remembered censorship. That's even funnier. But the Italians did a great job. They spoke out, and Corriere della Sera's editorial staff published an article explaining the incident. The newspaper writes that, according to the Russian Foreign Ministry, Lavrov supposedly gave a comprehensive answer to each of the questions asked by Corriere della Sera. But the editorial staff insists that this is not the case. And instead of comprehensive answers, Lavrov voiced Russian propaganda, which does not correspond to the actions at all. Next, I'll quote from the newspaper, which can be considered their official position. Quote, "The editorial board of the newspaper Corriere della Sera immediately responded to this accusation with a statement. The Russian Foreign Ministry answered the preliminary questions sent by Corriere della Sera with a lengthy text full of accusations and propaganda statements. When we requested a full interview, including cross-examination, fact-checking, and challenging the points that, in our opinion, required further investigation. The Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs categorically refused us this. Obviously, it intended to apply to the Italian newspaper the same criteria as to a country like Russia, where freedom of information has long been abolished. If Minister Lavrov wishes to conduct an interview in accordance with the principles of free and independent journalism, we will always be at his service." End of quote. Yes, just a wonderful position. That was a wonderful response from real journalists. They just exposed the Russians in their lies and said, listen, if Lavrov is ready to be torn apart by arguments in response to his nonsense and lies, let him come to a proper interview where he won't be the star, but where he'll be held accountable for every false statement. They say, listen, we don't mind, we'll publish such an interview, but you'll have to answer, really answer. And when this position was voiced to the Russians, Lavrov for some reason refused himself. And the Russians say, how come it wasn't published? And the journalists say, yes, absolutely, no problem, we'll do the interview, but you'll have to answer for the lies. But what could Lavrov have said that made the Italians decide not to publish it? And you don't have to look far for the answer. The Russian Foreign Ministry published Lavrov's answers to the Italian newspaper on its website. I won't quote everything. If you're interested, visit the Russian Foreign Ministry's website. I'll share one quote from Lavrov. He claims that deranged Russians believe Nazism has supposedly resurfaced not only in Ukraine but across all of Europe. And that's why Russians are ready to wage war against Nazism, just like in World War II. Until the very end. Lavrov is, I don't know, out of his mind. I think his brain is gone. Here's a quote from Lavrov. This is what Russians expected Italians to publish in their newspaper. Quote from Lavrov. "We are striving for and will achieve the return of Ukraine to the healthy, stable foundations of its statehood. This implies rejecting the servile provision of its territory for military development by NATO, as well as by the European Union, which is quickly turning into an equally aggressive military bloc. Cleansing from the Nazi ideology banned at Nuremberg, and the restoration of all rights to Russians, Hungarians, and all other national minorities. It is telling that the Brussels elites, while dragging the Kiev regime into the European Union, remain silent about its blatant discrimination against non-indigenous peoples. That's how Kiev astonishingly defines Russians who have lived in Ukraine for centuries. And at the same time, they present Zelensky's junta as defending European values. This is yet another confirmation that Nazism is once again raising its head in Europe. There's something to think about, especially in light of the fact that at the United Nations, Germany and Italy, together with Japan, have recently started voting against the annual General Assembly resolution on the inadmissibility of glorifying Nazism. Westerners openly admit they're waging a proxy war against Russia using Ukrainians, a conflict unlikely to end after the current crisis. It's not the first time we've had to stop fascist and Nazi aggressors. That's how it was in World War II, and it will be the same this time. Yes, friends, this is the nonsense from Lavrov the Italian newspaper wouldn't publish. Draw your own conclusions. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.